Hey everyone, I'm Sharlene Fernandes, and today I'll be talking about Roger Sperry. He was a pioneer in the field of neuroscience, and he was also the first person in psychology to be awarded the Nobel Prize for his discoveries on the functional specialization of the cerebral hemispheres. Before I jump into talking about his work and accomplishments, I just want to take you back in time to a slide in my academic ancestry presentation. So, we have John Watson at the very beginning of my academic ancestry. His students, Carl Lashley and Paul Weiss, were advisors of Roger Sperry. Then we have Roger Sperry, who will be the main focus of my presentation today. At the very end, we have Eyal Aharoni, who is currently my advisor here at GSU. Let's look at a brief timeline of Roger Sperry's life. He was born in Hartford, Connecticut in 1913 in a small suburb. His father was in banking and his mother was trained in business school. When he was 11, his father passed away and his mother started working at a local high school. He went on to graduate with an English major from Oberlin College. In college, he was extremely interested in sports. And in fact, he listed athletic coaching as his primary goal in his college applications. He completed his PhD in zoology under the guidance of Dr. Paul Weiss from the University of Chicago. Then, he completed his postdoc fellowship from Harvard under the guidance of Dr. Carl Lashley. He went on to become a professor of psychobiology at Caltech and worked there until he retired in 1984. Sperry was deeply influenced by William James' views, and at an early age he also read some of James' work, like his book, The Principles of Psychology. Sperry's research had four important phases where he attempted to answer two main questions. He wanted to know, where does behavior come from and what is consciousness? These four phases included nerve regeneration research, equipotentiality, split brain studies, and consciousness research. But today, I'll be focusing on his split brain studies. Sperry was interested in the corpus callosum as a graduate student. In the 1940s, the surgical section of the corpus callosum for the treatment of epilepsy was starting to gain traction. Oh, by the way, the corpus callosum is a broad band of nerve fibers joining the two hemispheres of the brain. The surgical removal of the corpus callosum were performed by doctors Vogel and Bogan in LA for the treatment of severe epilepsy. Researchers also found that severing the corpus callosum did not lead to any permanent cognitive deficits. That is surprising because the corpus callosum is made up of over 200 nerve fibers. Carl Lashley, Roger's advisor, also noted that the function of the corpus callosum must be mechanical to keep the hemispheres from sagging. Sperry had other views, however, and he devised experiments to test language function and other cognitive behavioral factors um, to understand the function of the two hemispheres. Gazzaniga and Sperry's first patient actually was a man known as W.J. He was a former Second World War paratrooper who had started having seizures after a German soldier hit him in the head with a rifle. In a typical experiment, or actually in that experiment, they found that for stimuli delivered to the left hemisphere, WJ showed no hang-ups. He simply pressed the button and told the scientists what he saw. However, with the right hemisphere, WJ said he saw nothing, yet his left hand kept pressing the button every time an image appeared. The left and right didn't know what the other was doing, said Gazzaniga. An example of the typical experiment that they conducted is given in the image on the screen. Basically, the conclusion from these experiments was that behavioral changes in one hemisphere were not transferred to the other. Through his experiments, he demonstrated the left brain right brain split. That is, the left hemisphere specialized in language and analytical skills, whereas the right hemisphere specializes in visuospatial abilities. There was an effect of these studies in the general media and public as well as in academia. The post hoc conceptualization of the findings that the right hemisphere was related to emotion and art and the left hemisphere was related to reasoning and intellectual pursuits was an oversimplification of Roger Sperry's studies and papers. However, Sperry tried to clarify his results. He noted a caveat to his findings where he said that when the brain is whole, the unified consciousness of the left and right hemispheres adds up to more than the individual properties of the separate hemispheres themselves. This was published in the Sunrise magazine in December 1987. However, the studies on functional specialization in the cerebral hemispheres led not only to wide public attention but also attention in academia. Because of his work in this area, he also was a co-recipient of the Nobel Prize in 1981 in medicine. Sperry worked as a professor at Caltech and he retired there in 1984. Later in his life, he started focusing on the mind-brain problem. He said that consciousness is generated from neural activity, but it is independent from it. He also discussed human values and its relation to physiology and consciousness. Although there was a strong philosophical element to his work, he believed that consciousness could be studied in a controlled manner, and much of his work contributed to the cognitive revolution. Later in his life, he developed lateral sclerosis, which affected his mobility and speech. In fact, his Nobel Prize acceptance speech was or had to be read out for him. So here are a few of my references and picture credits. And thank you for listening to this presentation. I hope it helps.